Uh, I hope you've all received the minutes from our August 6th TMC meeting. If you have, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. RTA next. I know I will just, for those in the room, let you know that Mr. Ortega is with us, Mr. Wilkins, Mr. Dilly, Mr. Rosema, Mr. Tomyer, and Ms. Moreno are all online. In speaking with Mr. Ortega a few minutes ago, and I'll turn it over to him in a moment, his recommendation was that we go to James to talk about some of the financing. We go to Rick to talk about programs, and then we go to General Maxwell, who has a proposal to share with us. And I don't know about all of you, but I'm really looking forward to today. I feel these last couple of meetings, I feel like we've sat and we've talked and we've had a great conversation and a lot has been discussed for a couple of hours. And then I walk back to the office and think, I have no idea what we actually did today to move this project forward. I know. And so we've got a lot of different options, and hopefully we are getting to that point where we can make recommendations to the board. Mr. Ortega.
Thank you, Jan, and members of the TMC. Thank you again for taking the time to help us get through this. I guess your lack of clarity is our opportunity, if you will. And I think that what you'll see today is really honing in on a couple of options or plans. Just very simplistically, the first plan is what I'll call the RTA Next Tweak Plan, which we didn't spend a lot of time on based on the direction from the board. Rick will go over that in a bit. Then we'll go over some of the conversations we've had regarding the 20-year plan with the 10-year option. So we'll call that the 10-20 plan or modified plan. And then I know that General Maxwell has a conversation he wants to have with the group and make a proposal. Before that, though, I would appreciate James giving an overview of the revenue projections and opportunities there for some discussion. And I'm going to rely on Jim and Dan to kind of keep things moving on that end, Jan, but I will be online. Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. All righty, James.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. So I'll start with the scenarios sheet. And this is more just information to kind of get a sense of where we are with these projections and these targets that we're providing, and that many of them are similar in the end result, which I think is a positive, that we're all kind of coming to the same place, regardless of whether the projection comes from Eller. It's something we've done internally just with a simple inflator. We're getting close to the same amount of money. So I,
for one, need to know what you're talking about.
this one.
Okay, I'd love a copy of that one.
Here you are.
Got it. Thank you. All righty. Sorry. Thank you.
So it starts with the Eller pessimistic, and it shows about $2.4 billion over 20 years. This is in 2023 dollars. And then if we take the baseline, it goes up to about 2.6 billion. So if we do a pessimistic based on 2025 dollars, it goes up to 2.8 billion, and then a baseline takes us all the way to 3.2 billion, and the optimistic is 3.4. So then we did something where we took the pessimistic, and since it was so pessimistic, and it was about $10 million below what the 2025 revenues were, we wanted to see how long it would take for that pessimistic forecast to intersect with an amount that would be equal to or greater than the 2025 collections. And so if we use the Eller pessimistic in 2023 dollars, we would not reach what we collected in fiscal 25 until 2042. If we use the baseline, that's the far right column, it would be more realistic, and we would reach that point in 2030 or 2031. So that was kind of goes back to what I was saying a week or so ago, that the baseline forecast, even though there were issues with it in the original 2006 plan, we have a better picture now of where we are, and so those last two columns kind of show where the 2023 dollars, how those would look compared to the reality of the collections in 2025. So that's just really all there is to say about this sheet. And at the bottom, I show the aggregate, how the collections would look in aggregate year after year, but they're the same forecasts and the same targets. So, are there any questions on this sheet? So if there are no questions, then let's move to the cash flow sheet. It looks similar to what we provided last week. We made a few changes though. I added an administration line. It's about $1 million a year for administration. I believe the other three, the net transit, rehab and safety, and categoricals, I believe those are the same.
That one on top.
So what we were trying to do is reach, using 2026 dollars, reach this 2.67 billion over 20 years. And keep in mind, it's similar to the numbers you saw on the previous sheet. Several of those forecasts are in that vicinity of 2.6 billion. So if we would have 2.6 billion over 20 years, and again, that's in line with several of the forecasts. And the monthly expenditure rate for the first decade, as it relates to the roadway element, would be about $4 million a month, which exceeds what we were able to achieve in the first RTA plan for the most part, at a monthly expenditure rate. And in the second decade, the monthly expenditure rate is about 5.5 million a month. And of course, these numbers are likely going to be, especially in the first decade, much higher than the 125.5 over a 10-year period. But this, like, again, this is a target, and we're looking at the total amount. So other than the roadway, the other four categories listed, well, three categories and administration, the total there would be about $76 million a year provided to those other categories. So that's a brief explainer. If anyone have any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
I do have a question. I know Mr. Ortega would like to speak. James, do you think that the kinds of dollars we saw in 23 to 25 reflect the last 20 years? Are they anomalies? Are they consistent? So I mean, we look at the last 20 years and the ups and downs, and we're taking a snapshot of the last 2 years and using that to project the next 20. Are you confident that these are the right numbers to use to make that projection?
Madam Chair, I am, because I feel like the anomalies actually were the financial crisis in 08, 09 and COVID. So those were highly unusual events, and that they happened within a decade or so of each other. I think those are the outliers. I think that looking at the last 3 or 4 years of collections, and then looking at the upward trend going back to 2007, if you plot those exceptions, you could still see an upward trajectory in TPT collections through the entire RTA plan. But they dipped and then started again. So it affected it severely. But I am confident that a decade from now, we will not be collecting $125 million a year in TPT excess tax.
And I think our last 20 years also, we had TPT, but it also projected about a 3% annual increase in population. How have we accommodated that, or what's the factor in this for that?
Well, unfortunately, I mean, I can't speak to the Eller projections. They
Right.
do take those things into account. With our time limitations and staff limitations, ours are based strictly just on an inflation factor. So we don't take into account it. It's not a true forecast.
Makes me actually more confident.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Ortega.
Thank you, Jan. Answer a couple of your questions. The RMAP projections for population through, I believe it's 2050, is about 180,000 people. Contrast that with almost 400,000, almost 500,000 people from 06 to 26, and that kind of gives you a thumbnail sketch of what those population projections are and how they're much scaled back in comparison to what we had in the '06 projections. That's the first thing. The second thing is you asked about the revenues and using the snapshot. So if you go back to that graph that shows the trajectory of the pessimistic level, you can see that the intersection of the if you look at that, the gradient of the pessimistic line is not altered. And so the idea is that they would intersect and then they would start to go up. And so it doesn't necessarily, I mean, it does use the current revenue targets and forecasts that are the actuals actually, and translates them into projections. But then it doesn't necessarily just go up because we're seeing a better than usual, if you will, or historic revenues the last couple of years, Jan. And I think that's important to point out. Now, by the way, we're not married to these. These are our suggestions based on the fact that on that left column, that L or pessimistic $23, those numbers we're exceeding them now. And so when you look at that, we can go back to that, but I think that's artificially low. And that's why we've suggested at least come up to what we've seen the last couple of years. Yeah. If you can go back to the slide that shows the cash flow. One thing I wanted to point out here, this model, if you will, is for that option 2, and we'll get to that in a minute. But one thing that's not in here is any kind of contingency as a separate line. And if you remember, we had a conversation about contingency and taking it out based on the contingency that was included in the projects. So I'm going to suggest that if this scenario is chosen, that we consider contingency as any excess revenue that comes in, simply because if you remember, the contingency that we talked about was on the roadway element, and we estimated that was in the 200 million range, is about 10%. And so without the roadway element included in that first 10-year period, I think that we should be focused on building up a contingency before those dollars or excess revenues are redistributed, if you will, to other projects or to other needs within the program. The second thing to consider is if the board decides to go with a 20-year funding and this plan funded over 20 years, then that contingency would carry forward the entirety of the program. And we can set a target, 50 or 100 million, some amount that could go toward that contingency. I don't see a need for us to look at bonding in the first 2 periods, but it could be if the board decides they want to go with 20-year funding and they want to go to a 20-year ask, that bonding could be a conversation that we could have in the second half of the program. So that period 3 and period 4, we could see a need or a want, if you will, for bonding. I'm not necessarily advocating anything right this second. I'm just pointing those out because if we do well in the period 1 and period 2 time frame, we may be in a position to fast forward some of those period 4 projects into period 3 so that we're completing within the end of the 20-year program. So I just wanted to point out we have thought about a lot of those pieces, and I wanted to just let the committee know that that is part of the discussion that we're having internally. Thank you,
Tim, let me ask a question, then I'll ask you. And I just want to be clear again. When the 2.6 roughly billion includes about $500 million in non-half-cent excise tax funding. Am I reading that correctly? With the HERF and STPG?
Madam Chair, I'm not sure what you're looking at exactly, but what I will say.
Well, I'm just okay.
That's the 20-year grand total.
Okay, so I'm looking at the half-cent excise tax funding, and then the HERF 12.6 and STPG.
So Madam Chair, that would be, that, yes, more or less an additional.
In
Addition,
addition, it's an addition.
right, so it's okay, that's what I'm getting for but just, I want to make sure I'm understanding this. The plan is 2,2,670,000,000. That includes $500 million over the life of the plan that is not from the 0.5 cent excise tax.
Madam Chair, no, the 2.6 is strictly TPT.
Okay.
Right.
And so we would add the 500 million?
If you, Madam Chair, if I might help, if you decided to allocate a certain amount.
Thank you. That's what I'm getting to. These include the regional. Go ahead. Thank you.
Right.
I'm sorry, Michael, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, so what I'm saying is the way that we crafted this was to show TPT and a balanced 20-year program at 2.67 billion. Okay.
That includes.
No, it does not. It does not include. If there is an interest in including those regional dollars, the HERF and STBG, then it would increase that amount. The reason that I showed this was to give the committee an understanding of the amount of money that could be available annually to put towards projects, and I'm going to call them RTA Next like projects during the entirety of this program. And so those dollars, if the committee decides so much of that on an annual basis, so if you look at the 27 year, that's about 45 million. So if you wanted to put some amount there, then that would go towards projects that could be identified.
Got it.
As a part of the ballot language or as a part of the truth in taxation.
Got it. Thank you.
You're
Tim.
welcome.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And to that previous point, it's $1 billion over the 20 years of additional dollars.
Yep. Thank you.
So that's one point. Second point is, if we land on some form of projection of dollars from the TPT, that would apply whether it's options 1 or option 2, or whether it's General Maxwell's plan. I mean, whatever plan would be moving forward, we're first agreeing to what are the dollars we're assuming are coming in. This is not tied to Mr. Ortega's plan. This is tied to an updated view of the world.
Absolutely.
Regardless of what plan. But what's important there is, and I appreciate Mr. Ortega being explicit that whether it's the the director's plan option or General Maxwell's option, those other dollars matter because they're either being used to deliver RTA 1 or they're being used to deliver RTA like projects. So the 2.7 is important and the distribution of the 2.7 is important, but actually the 3.7-ish is just as important, because if we're cutting deals, and I don't mean that negatively, I mean that positively. If we're going to say mindfully, we do this distribution of dollars in RTA, TPT, but we're going to use the other dollars in a different chemistry, it's the total that matters, because that's what the region's doing, and that's what the jurisdictions get. And at this point, I don't have a good feel, or under any of the scenarios, what does the city get versus others versus, overall investment. But all of that, I think it's obvious, but I'm stating it anyway. All of that matters. And at least from my perspective, if we come up with a deal that does certain things with the TPT and does other things with the HERF and the STBG that on the whole work well together, I'm good with that, but they have to be tied together in a way that whoever's getting money out of the TPT has confidence, and whoever's getting money out of the other sources has confidence that the money will be there.
Good. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, I was looking at numbers badly, but trying to get to the same basic concept that the numbers we have in front of us include a whole lot extra money than just the TPT. Bill, yes, sir.
Yeah, Madam Chair, James. I understand the 125.5 for the first 10 years. Where did the 141.5 come for the next 10 years?
So that was to reach the 2.6 billion. I just simply divided it by 10.
Okay.
The second half.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tim, to your point, the distribution of what's up on the screen right now is tied to that option 2, but the totals are not. The totals stand. Okay, so I just want to make sure you were clear on that. I think that's important. To your point, Tim, about the dollars on a regional, looking at all the dollars, I would expand the conversation to include the RAC funding, the ADOT funding as well, because I think if you look at how we address the region's needs and challenges, if you will, all 3 of those pots. Now they have been treated distinctly, and there's reasons for that, and they may even should still be treated distinctly, but they have to be looked at all inclusive. So for example, we talked about TPT, that's the basis for the conversation, but then the regional money and how that's used, there's different ways to use that and even allocate that. But then we take a further step and we look at the RAC funding. We get about $150 million a year. We were talking about, and I think it was Terry at the last meeting or 2 meetings ago, said, hey, we're looking at over $1 billion potentially for SR 210. Well, do the math at $150 million a year, you can see how long it would take us to amass those dollars. So I think that we look at all of that together in terms of the resources that are available to the region. Now, should they be included in the plan and brought to the voters? I mean, that's a conversation that we should probably have. But ultimately, at least for this group, I think it's important to look at it holistically and say, all right, we've got all of this potential resource, and how do we address the needs of the region in a way that can, obviously help us address those needs and all the things that go along with that. So I just wanted to expand that thought a little bit, just to say, hey, you know what, don't forget about that as well, because I think that could be part of how we bring additional resources to the game.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I think to this, and Tim McCon, you would say, over these weeks, we've talked about sort of 3 things we have to focus on, right? What are the revenues? What are the expenditures? And when do we have an election? And those are really the 3 core questions that we keep wrestling around. So this conversation first about what makes sense is for us to try to wrestle with and come to some agreement on establishing what we believe is the revenue. And once we can do that, then we can hopefully figure out what a plan is. Tim?
Thanks, Chair. And I just wanted to circle back on something Mike said earlier too. Assuming we can come up with a plan that has whatever baseline assumptions or pessimistic assumptions or whatever, but an overall plan that gets each jurisdiction to where they're trying to achieve as far as contribution, then I definitely support Mr. Ortega's assertion that revenues above expectation go to first bill to contingency. But that's kind of the opposite of what the previous RTA Next were, because the first excess revenues above pessimistic were to get the city to its minimum allocation, minimum from our perspective. And I know that's a subject we all can discuss and disagree on or agree on, but it was first to get us to where we were minimally accepting a plan that got there. But if we get there some other way and it first goes to fill a contingency bucket, then I'm good with that.
And I want to make sure I'm looking at the board. I don't see Shane, Terry. So I'm trying not to ignore you, but I don't see a hand going up. What's this? Are we comfortable with, yeah, please, Ted.
Sorry,
Please,
Madam Chair. I told you
pay.
I'd wait till my.
And I didn't believe you then, and no.
The bottom line is the numbers are the same.
Yeah.
So you heard James describe how they got to the second numbers on Bill's question. Everything that we've been moving forward with is based on the 2.67 and knowing that we've got the PAG funds available. And the real question is the breakout in those options on how we're going to use it. I don't think anybody's at least I haven't heard it from either the TMC or at the board level talking about increasing that 2.67 number.
Got it.
initially.
Thank you.
We
Yeah.
know we have other funds,
Yeah.
including the RAC, which some of the options address as well.
Thank you. And I think to identify that this is the end, if you will, because I think that there's still some conversations about some people, whether how we feel about the use of the regional funds over a period of time, but at least the ability to say the 2.67 is what we have available. We may have policy determinations and discussions of how we bifurcate the dollars and how we use them, but it's in. And then there's that other bucket of RAC.
Yes, ma'am. And the fact that they both get to 2.67 at the end, this one, I mean, they just show it differently.
Got it.
You know, the one from Eller in the adjusted 2023 is going to be more of a gradual climb. And it will be in year 13 where they'll cross.
Mhm.
But if we know we're hoping that we've got excess monies, that may be better than doing a flat line and a flat line.
Got it.
So
Thank
it's
you.
just, but that's probably
Where we
technique.
get to it. Good. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Jeff.
Thanks, Jan. I think Jan, you kind of, I guess, clarified. I mean, again, when we say PAG money is available, again, they weren't available for necessarily the RTA 1 projects, but these were RTA next like projects or other competitive type of projects that may not be listed on the ballot, maybe listed on truth and taxation, but I don't think we've made that determination. I'm not sure if we're going to have that determination in the next few days to be able to list them on truth and taxation, unless that's where our conversation is going to go. But these, again, PAG regional monies were not necessarily to complete RTA 1 projects.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think, again, that we're looking at the end, and now we know that there's some policy conversation that comes from that. Is there more, James, is that anything else to add, or Mike, or anyone about? Okay. Yes, sir, Dan.
Madam Chair, just so for
Mhm.
awareness, we did send out a companion piece just to show our confidence in these numbers from a different perspective.
Okay.
We can walk you all through that if you'd like, just to clarify. But it
Yeah.
was sent out, so I just wanted to
Okay.
make you aware, and you could use this copy, so you don't need to dig.
Yeah. Okay.
At your pleasure, we can.
I think, well, I think what we're getting to is that there's a lot of, there are a variety of angles that we're coming to this. And I think as General Maxwell said, we're hitting it just under 2.7 billion. Is there as I say, I'm trying to split it into the buckets, with the first being the revenue side. Is there any concern or opposition to using that as the number that we begin to, as we use as the cap from which we begin to identify how we bifurcate different expenditures? And I'm looking at the board and I see no hands going up. Okay. All right. Well, so we've established how much money we're going to have. It's huge. We can adjourn. Thank you. All right. Now I'm told, Rick, I was looking at poor Jim, but Rick, does this go to you now to tell us how we spend the money that we've identified? May I interrupt for 1 second? I just do want to comment, because I think you all know Kurt Lewick and John Bernal and several of our folks are not with us right now this morning. Many of you know Suzanne Shields, who worked for Pima County for a long, long time and was the first director of our flood control district. This morning, we are naming a piece of the loop, a bridge, after Suzanne. And so I think hopefully some of Suzanne's family, Kurt, I believe that's where John is, Chuck, Maureen Huckleberry, there's a lot of people there today. So many of you had an opportunity to work with Suzanne, and I wanted to just mention that and acknowledge those who aren't with us, but you will have an opportunity at some time soon to go across the Shields Loop. So thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for that. No, Suzanne did a lot of work for the region, multiple capacities, so appreciate that.
Thank you.
Issa, if you could bring up the funding summary to deliver. That's the one. It's a one-page handout. It's the simplest one I've handed out over the last several weeks. So this was in response to the question, or I guess the request from our last meeting to highlight how exactly would, because as you recall, when we were looking at the discussion, all the projects were kind of lumped in one line item. And there was a request made, say, how could this break out? So what we want to do is be responsive to that and show all the remaining activities and remaining projects in here to give you an idea of how they would be in big category funding, but to show that they would be complete in their capability to deliver on this. So a couple of key explanations on this. We group this by multiple sources to try and make it easier to understand. So there are a lot of sources we're utilizing across all these projects. Our initial versions on this was incredibly detailed, and everybody's comment was shrink it back. That's going to become too confusing. So it aligns with that. It is bundled, it is grouped, but it aligns with our 25-29 tip. Along those lines, we will need to utilize our TPC and TIP committees for our actual programming activities at the project level so that we can ensure all of our delivery needs are going to be met. So this is by no means programming from our end. We know we're going to engage those committees as we move forward and utilize that resource. We use totals to avoid the complications with our moving targets for our active construction projects. So you can imagine that as a project is burning through several $100,000, if not a couple $1 million per monthly, where are we at to try and put a pin in that? We went back to how we've previously communicated at a summary level with total amounts, total amount needed, total amount available. So that's a very reflective type of situation. It doesn't reflect the immediate accuracy today, but the complications of that would become a little bit more challenging. So we felt that would still be accurate and representative. The projects chosen, if you look at the far right column, it's titled Proposed 2026 RTA Tax. So the projects chosen for that $495 million total, last time we referred to it as the $500 million total, we chose and we're suggesting that this be the way it gets laid out in consistency with past efforts and the ones we're working on today, is we're using the scope change projects that had previously been identified. So that's in that contribution. First Avenue from Grant to River has been added. You've heard Mike refer to a number of times that we're looking at either 4, possibly 5 projects. That's one that being to make sure that we're properly compliant, that we're above board on that we include that in the mix along with the other 4. And then we identified and are suggesting Grant Road phases 5 and 6 as an additional one that would bring the total up to the 495 target we're trying to hit. And that's simply recognizing that Grant Road is one of the key priorities within the region. It's not the only one, but its total aligns with that. It makes for a nice, easy listing. So those were some of the things that we kind of look at and said, that really makes a nice candidate one to suggest for that. The Irvington
Rick,
interchange.
can I interrupt you?
I'm sorry, yes, go ahead.
And forgive me, I don't have all the documents. What is that piece? 5 and 6 is from?
Grant Road 5 and 6 is what we call the middle section on
Middle
there.
set, thank you.
Yeah, you're working, the west end has been built, the east end is under construction, the middle 2 miles.
What we were talking geographically, thank you.
Yep. I think it's Park Pablo, yeah, something, middle 2 miles.
Thank you.
I know Sam's memorized every project limit on his jobs.
Rick,
Okay.
I'm gonna interrupt you 1 second. Tim, did you want to speak now, or are we a comment, or wait for Rick to finish?
I've got a comment / question.
Okay.
So if I read this correctly, this is putting additional City of Tucson projects in the risk of RTA next passing bucket, which means whatever dollars we have now skew further away from the city delivery, and the city takes more of a risk of RTA next passing than we stand right now with the 4 projects that were previously deferred. That's how I read this.
Jim?
Madam Chair, Mr. Tamir, this is an exercise. This is not a cash flow document. This is an exercise to show how it balances on the whole. This is not going to be how we are going to necessarily delegate or distribute these funds. This is purely an exercise to demonstrate that we're funding it at the right level. It's not associating it to specific projects.
So at some point, Jim, this body would be looking at saying, we want to get to about the 495 million, and we might swap out Silver Bell Phase 3 for something else. But this is.
Yeah, Madam
Just
Chair, this is
demonstration.
exactly the case. And I would
Got it.
add,
Thank you.
this also squares pretty well with how we see the program delivering over time. The projects that have RTA funding in it, RTA 2026 funding in it, are the projects that will probably be the last ones constructed.
Got it. Thank you. Ted?
And Madam Chair, thank you. And also, I think it's important as we get ready to go through the 4 different options that right now the executive director's contemplating proposing to the board. Some of the options don't use the RTA tax to pay for the completion of RTA one. They've got alternatives, or they use partial RTA tax, I should say. So it's, I agree with everything Jim said. They're just showing, I think, what's there. Ultimately, the funds all go into the RTA fund, or the RTF, the Regional Transportation Fund, and it comes out of there. So I think that's important to remember as we go through the different options.
Okay, but I think important for city's perspective, again, we're looking at, this is a draft, and while we thanked him for giving up many of the city projects in his space, we might not be looking at it as a final draft. Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Jan. So Tim, you're right. But let's kind of talk through that for a minute. So keep in mind, and I'm gonna use different language than what Ted just did, because I think it's important that we know kind of how we got to this point. So if you remember when we first started the conversation about we'll call it funding scenarios for RTA 1, there was about 140 million that was identified from the regional money. So that the HERF and STBG, that 140 million was to come from that source to finish RTA 1. That was through the 29 tip. Okay. When we went back and looked at, okay, what is the cost to complete the RTA 1, and that's about $500 million. If we don't use that regional money through 29, then we've got to fund that some other way. And so what I suggested and what I did was built in a scenario whereby the new revenue from the TPT would go to fund that. And so what you see here is a scenario, if you will, of where and how that 500 million would be allocated or would be spent. Now, I can tell you that there's some of these projects that have to go to the voter anyway, which are the rescope projects, and the funding associated with those. There's also projects that we don't have enough money to complete given fund balance and the TPT. So we're short somewhere about 360 million. If we took out the 140 million and we didn't have this TPT source, we're still short about 360 million. And so we'll have to figure that out, assuming that the voter, we're not successful when we go to the voter. So yes, you're right, but then we can also move these around. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, the vast majority of projects in RTA 1 that have not been completed and have to be on the list are City of Tucson projects. And so we can pick and choose some that aren't. I think the Silver Bell, which is already chosen, is not entirely in the city. That's in the county and in Marana. But after that, it falls off pretty quickly. I think North First is another one that's not in the city, but then it falls off pretty quick, Tim. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure you're spot on in terms of identifying that. And we're certainly, as Jan mentioned, it's a draft. We can move the dollars, but ultimately they need at the bottom line to add up to 495 million that we would take out of the TPT. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And forgive me, I'm going to go backwards for just one second, but I just want to say something out loud, because we have had some conversations starting with some members of the RTA board about a desire to look to go to the ballot with a number larger than the half cent. And at this point, we are continuing, I believe, to recommend from this body that we keep it at the half cent and that we're, moving that forward. As I say, I know there's been conversations about that, but I just want to make sure that we are all recognizing that the revenue is based on the half cent. So thank you. All right. Rick.
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, Tim, I'm sorry. I beg your pardon. Yes, sir.
That's okay. I'm not quite ready to close out this part of the dialogue, because in the worst case scenario, and as has been discussed at this table, if we end up in a no TPT extension and it's just use the money we have is going toward projects outside the city and inside the city, active projects. This just puts another city project in the, I'm not sure we're going to have the money to do it. And Grant 5.6 did nothing wrong except sit there for 2.5 years waiting for RTA to tell us that we could go from 90%. I am very grateful to Mr. Ortega that he sent an email saying, what you waiting for? Go get it. Here's your money. But it's on the not done list because we couldn't get it advanced from RTA. And that's why many of the city projects are at the end of the list. So if this is just a scenario, and if it's just an exercise, take the money from somebody else. Thanks.
Thank you. Mike?
Thanks. So hey, Tim, I'm happy to look at another project. There really aren't any other agencies or jurisdictional partners that have projects that need to be completed. And so if you want to pick another project, happy to do that. So let's take a little bit of a step back. The current TIP goes through 29, and that current TIP shows 140 million-ish towards the completion of RTA 1. Now, clearly, that's a policy decision the board would have to change or make a different decision. My gut is this: we would not change the TIP, obviously, until we knew the outcome of the election in March, if that's in fact what we end up doing. I don't see a scenario right this second where I would recommend that we do something different than what's in the TIP if the voters if we're not successful with the voters. So if that's the case, that 140 million, my recommendation would be to go back into at least completion of as much of the RTA 1 projects as possible. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, though, and this is something that we have been guided on by the attorney, there is a substantial change component as well. And if we're not successful with a conversation with the voter, Tim, I don't know that we'll have authority to finish some of these projects based on that guidance from the legal folks. So I'm hoping we don't have to get to that point, but I want to be very upfront with you all about how this could work or not. And I think that the reality is we don't have enough money if we go with the scenario that takes regional money and puts it into and doesn't allocate it to the RTA 1 projects. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I completely agree. Sorry for just jumping in, which is why I would stop all work on any non-City of Tucson projects tomorrow. I would stop spending money anywhere outside the city, divert all money to the city projects, and then we all have to share the pain of trying to get this thing done.
Okay. Rick?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, just a couple additional items to highlight that you'll see on here. We included at ballot number 22, the Irvington interchange. Right now, that project, we show it as an active project because the ADOT team on that is finalizing the design in the process of getting clearances, and we'll be advertising that later this fall. So that's still a project that's going to be forthcoming. However, the contribution financially on that was covered in previous fiscal years. So we've done the same thing with Sunset, other situations. We wanted to properly reflect that, but it sticks out as to, well, why do you list a project with zero? Because its status is still pending, but the financial part's already been addressed. Lastly, the bottom row under the fund balance portion, the 556,337, that's our available fund balance. We show that it programs and projects and aligns with completing the remaining. So that's what the task at hand was done. We actually have a small amount above that of approximately $20 million. That is a very, very thin margin, given the magnitude and the size of the projects we still have to advertise and that we know are coming up, particularly on Silver Bell, 22nd Street, Houghton. So we recognize that, yes, we're in the black. That's the good news. We don't have a lot of cushion should the market conditions or contracting conditions change drastically over what we've expected or what we've anticipated or what we've collected from the project teams through the summer's exercise. So wanted to let you guys know that we have that little bit on there, but not a giant cash cow. With that, Madam Chair, I can answer any other questions if there are any, or I can move on to the next options.
Go ahead, Rick, move on.
You got it. Okay. Going through the detail breakout now that supports the information that James provided and that you heard referenced as several of the items on the discussion. So the first item up, Issa, if you could bring up option 1. Perfect. You heard Mike reference this as our minor tweaks. So rather than go through every single one of these line item aspects of it, like I did last time, I'm going to give you a summary high clip. I can dive into questions as you see fit. So some of the this one had some major changes, updates since last week's. Keeping consistent with the suggested aspects, added the First Avenue from Grant to River to ensure that proper scope change compliance. But you'll notice on this option, it has a 0 allocation because that's going to be covered under the fund balance or under the regional funds as Mike laid out. Also cleaned up all the formatting. So you saw previous versions that had multiple colors on there showing how we had to carry that evolution of all the changes, tweaks, and requests that came in from the jurisdictions. This is now a much more polished version that would look closer to what its final format for a voter would be. So it's got the sequencing. We've put the scope modified projects up at the front and then all the new projects going forward. Those are really the major changes on this one because this has had the balance, as you saw at the last week's presentation. This continues to still be a fiscally balanced option.
Questions, comments?
If not, I can dive into the second option, then we can come back and whatever questions there may
Thank
be. And Issa, you can bring up option 2. Perfect. So this is the one you heard Mike refer to as our modified RTA plan. So this one did take a lot of formatting changes as well as some other things I'm going to highlight on this because it takes the breakdown, a lot of the comments and discussion from the previous meetings and incorporates that. So for format orientation on this, basically what you're going to see is at the top, we try to break it into the 2 10-year cycles that we've been talking about. So that's in there. Also separated the RTA funds, the PAG funds, and the other funds, which would be the RAC or grant funds that we know we're dealing with. So that seemed to give additional clarity during the discussion last week. Went ahead and incorporated that in there. You see the top half are the 6 projects that were talked about in the summary I just provided, totaling up to $495 million. We increased the overall funding allocation. You'd see it on page 2, but I'm not going to go there just yet, to align with the $1.255 billion that James shared in his cash flow. The $495 for roadway, you remember last time was a single line item for completing RTA. We've separated that out to the roadway element with the specific projects named. The other $10 million that was identified for completion and fulfillment of the bike commitments, that's going to be down in that category. I'll get to that in a second. So one of the major changes you'll see on this, and if you look towards the bottom of page 1, is we reduced the PAG funding allocation. Previously, we were carrying a total of about $42.5 million annually. Reduced that down to $40 million, which allows for better discretionary uses that may arise throughout the region. So that's just setting a budget number that would be allocated to the projects we highlighted and just picked off, running from the top down, tried to get projects that added up and manually do that so that everybody got at least 1 or 2 projects coming out of the gate. But that's where the $400 million aligns. So that's the purpose of why that target then was reduced a little bit, so that it adds the ability for discretionary use through the PAG tip process for those issues that arise outside of the RTA. In addition, we advanced an allocation for both the Colossal Cave as well as Marianne Cleveland Way projects to the tune of approximately $5 million from periods 3 and 4 into 1 and 2. So that could get a running start at those projects on there so that the heavy duty construction activities could then be implemented in periods 3 and 4 where the bulk of the funds are. To offset both of those adjustments, we went up to the Cortero project on line 2 and reduced the reduced the PAG allocation on that and increased the RAC funding contribution to that. Now, one of the key things, and we'll have to have a discussion about that, that's a suggestion that we identified to accommodate all that, but that recognizes that RAC funding, it's not a set amount each time. You've heard Mike talk about, we generally plan on an allocation of approximately $150 million, but it is a finite allocation. So by doing that, we're making sure that that project is prioritized. That means those allocations that may or may not go to other places, then we have to have that conversation. Is that where we want them to go? So basically it's saying that rack allocation should be available, but at the same time, that's not going to go to other possible needs throughout the region. We'll want to make sure everybody's on board with that. But it does show up how that's all lining up and to hit that $400 million total.
Good. Rick, I'm going to ask you to pause for just a second and go to Mike and then Sam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to point out, Rick had mentioned the 400 million of the regional money. I wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking about that because I think it was Shane, or maybe it was Jeff, I don't remember, but one of you all asked about the competitive nature of funding, and also what do we do in case of an emergency or something comes up that we didn't plan for in the 20-year horizon. And so my thought was to artificially hold that at 40 million a year, and then any excess money would be available on an annual basis for programming, if you will. And that process would involve, the TIP development. We've talked about going into an annual TIP development cycle, but that will help in terms of addressing, we'll call them off-plan needs that are still, and we all know they're going to come up. I think in Sahuarita, there was an economic development transportation opportunity that was difficult for Sahuarita to address. Well, this could be an avenue for that. And I wanted to put a little more emphasis on that just because I know that has been a challenge, but I think that this could, in essence, do both. I mean, some dollars allocated for specific projects, again, identified in the plan or in the truth and taxation language, but the funding is then identified and, quite frankly, secured for those projects, which then gives us the opportunity to identify those projects to the voter, so that the voters in areas that maybe don't have anything in the first two periods would see that they do get some investment in that first period 1 and period 2. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sam, I'm going to ask you 1 second. Jeff, I know you'd indicated you have to leave. Was there any comment or anything you needed to say before logging off?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I think Mike summarized well to just now, so
Okie doke.
appreciate
you.
it. If I get back, I'll see if you're still going. Hopefully,
Oh, odds are with you. So, be right back. Thank you. Sam
Okay.
and then Ted, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rick, so question on the second column there, plan years 1 through 10, PAG fund allocation. That 400 million includes about 150 million of STBG. Have you gone through and identified which of these projects are willing to be federalized to accept that STBG?
We have not had that discussion at the time. We would use the TIP and TPC committees to help with that effort.
All right, thank you.
We recognize that is a constraint, so that is a key component on there, is which ones are good candidates for that federalization. But we want to have that at those committee levels with the delivery professionals.
Thank you. Ted.
Madam Chair, I was just going to reach out to Jeff and tell him that if he wanted to connect with me later today, I could talk him through option 3. So
We will,
nothing to add.
on the text, I'll find them. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't catch you. All right. All right. Rick?
Okay, let's see, got through that. Thank you for the expansion on the issue, Mike, for the 40 million and clarification on that. I covered how McWay and Colossal have been incorporated. If you go to the safety and ADA element on page 2, at the top in line 29, you'll see where that $10 million surplus allocation for commitment, for the amount to fulfill commitments for the bike facilities. There's the $10 million allocation that we'd identified last week. So that combined with the roadway aspect gives you your 505 to complete, total out that amount. Then there's a small amount. We identified this last week as a non-assigned allocation, just to be part of this original amount out the door. So that's 5 million at line 37. The element number 3, arterial, the rehabilitation program that we're introducing on this. We've modified the title on this. Jim will give an expansion on this and give more of an overview of how that will work. But we made sure we align with what he's going to be handing out here shortly. So looking at arterial collector, road pavement rehabilitation, and safety improvement. Same intent as what was talked about last time, but Jim will talk about more of the details about how that's going to operate. In response to our understanding of the comments, if you go down to the transit, skipping over the environmental element, there were no changes there. If you go down to the transit element, we advanced the potential grant allocation that was associated with the high capacity transit improvements and moved that into the first 10-year period. If we understood and did the comments from the city on that one correctly, moved it from the back half to the front half. So that's now shown in there. And then lastly, if you go down to category 6 or element 6, debt service and the administrative aspects on that, we've incorporated, you haven't heard a lot of discussion about the administration oversight, the Main Street program, but we went ahead and incorporated a $10 million allocation in there that we're assuming that would be a $1 million annual on that. That still needs to be flushed out and discussed further because as you've heard Mike talk about, there may be things that we can help facilitate to overall delivery aspects. Those may or may not become project charges rather than program charges. So we wanted to at least acknowledge that there will likely be some charges against that they'll have to be accounted for, but still to be flushed out on the exact details of how that would shake out.
Rick, I'm going to interrupt you 1 second.
By all means.
Tim?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Rick, can you roll back to the transit element? I think, and I'll defer to Sam if he wants to clean this up a bit. You got it half right, the high capacity transit improvements. The other allocation, yes, the grant, federal grant would all be in the first 10 years, as would the local match. So the 35 million in the first 10 years with 35 million in the second 10 years doesn't work. You need all 70 and 70.
For the match.
Sam, is that correct?
What I'm hearing is you need, if all 70 is in the first 10, you need the full 70 match to that. And so the 35 that you have in the second 10 has to be in the first so that we get the match right. Is that?
Yeah. Madam Chair, Tim, that's correct. The local match would likely all be spent over a 3-year period in the first 10-year period. So we would need the entire 70 million for that project to be made whole.
Got it. Thank you. Mike? And then
Chair Tim, that's going to be a tall order just because of the way that the operations is laid out. We'll take a stab at that. I know that we looked at that. I'm a little nervous about how that will shake out because of the operations piece. We'll go back and take a look at it, but I just wanted to voice that because that may be a little tougher than it might look, only because we didn't want the service level to change from period 1 and 2 to period 3 and 4. But if the group is okay with that, we can certainly look at that. I understand the concern. I just letting you know that might be a tall order for us. Thank you.
Mike, what were you thinking? I mean, how did you think we were going to, I'm assuming there's a thought that if you only had the 35 million in the first year, but the full 70, how did we think we might be able to make up that other 35 if it was not moved from the second bucket?
Well, Madam Chair, given that it's a federal program, my gut is it's going to take us a while to ramp up. And Tim or Sam, you can help us with that, but it's going to take us a while to ramp up. And quite frankly, I'm almost hoping that we don't have the need for that additional 35 in the first 2 periods. If you're confident that we're going to need it, then I'll get to work on trying to figure that piece out. Again, what I'm trying to do is keep the service level the same, so we're not having a change in service level from one period to the other. That's all.
Thank you, Sam. Then Tim.
Yep. Madam Chair, yeah, so we did take a look at that, Mike. It will take some time to ramp up, but once we're in construction and procuring the vehicles for that project, our schedule shows, a 3-ish year timeline, and we've got to spend that local match within that 3-year timeline to match the federal funds. So it's very likely that, assuming that project starts in the first 10-year period, we would need the full local match in that 10-year period. So we did take a look at that, Mike, and there's just no way that it could be spread out over the full 20 years.
Okay.
Madam Chair, just real quick, did you say that there's an opportunity to expand revenue on this? Did I hear you say that correctly? I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh, yeah, that's, yeah, that's what I
That would
heard.
be helpful.
Yeah.
That would be very helpful, Madam Chair, just letting you know that.
Tim? Yeah,
Yeah, I think Sam covered it pretty well.
Okay.
What
Got
I
it.
would suggest though is, two things. One, I don't know what the line, I know that line 45 is important and essential. I don't know what's in line 45 to know whether that 25 million, which is expanded service, could be swapped into the second period or third and fourth periods for, swap it out for the, 25 of the 35. And if we even had 60 on that line item in the first 10 years, we might be able to even make that work from a cash flow perspective. My other is, I know your math is elegant, where your first period and your second period balance, but I think it's also possible to grab the 35 million from whatever the new word for arterial reconstruction is in the first 10 and then make it whole in the second 10. I know you like balance and I know you like symmetry, but there's money that could flip down to transit and then back up to arterial.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Okay, Rick?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, that actually concluded with my last statement on the admin stuff. So at that point in time, any other questions that anybody has, be happy to address.
Jim? I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, members of the TMC, one thing I did want to follow up on is we did have the item for arterial road rehabilitation. We've actually expanded the definition of that. I've distributed an updated version of the scope and how the project funding would lay out. One of the things we found is that in reviewing the functional classification maps, some of the jurisdictions don't have quite as much arterial roadway in it as they would need to benefit fully from this if we're going to be distributing those funds. So we've expanded the roadway or the arterial rehabilitation description to include collector roads. And we have attached, as I mentioned, the map. We've also updated the distribution criteria to include updated population numbers basically through 2024 from the Arizona Office of Economic Opportunity. So we've got the latest versions of it. Again, we would still propose to look at the distribution formula on an annual basis, but we wanted to be responsive to the comments raised at last week's meeting. Finally, just as a matter of note, right now, if you were to look at the arterial and roadway or collector roadway network, as PAG has evaluated them recently, basically we're looking at a little over 500 miles of arterial roadway network. A little over 100 of those miles are currently in poor to failed condition. We increased that to a little over 1,000 miles if we add in the major collectors and increase the number of miles that are in poor to fair condition or poor to failed condition rather, to about 245 miles. Looking at the numbers, that would, if we were to look at rehabilitation, fairly aggressive rehabilitation, we'd be looking at about $530 million committed to that, with the balance of the money available for safety improvements.
Thank you. Tim?
A quick clarification question. Is that 500/1000 center line miles or lane miles?
Madam Chair, Mr. Muir, that would be center line miles.
I appreciate the clarification. I don't know that that truly reflects the magnitude of work and failed roadway out there. one lane, one center line mile of a 2-lane road is not the same as one center line mile of a 6-lane arterial. So my advocacy is to look at it from a lane mile perspective versus a center line mile perspective.
Just an observation, we did use an average, a weighted average for the numbers, but I understand and respect your concern and be happy to review it with you.
Thank you. Okay. Other comments? Michael, I'm going to turn this over to you for a second and have you, help us understand sort of where we are and what you were looking at today as the proposal before the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to refresh your memory, at the board meeting, I was asked to look at, we'll call it the modified plan. And the modified plan included components, and I think we talked through most of those. The piece that, I guess I need to know from you, generally speaking, does this make sense? I'm not, this stuff's hard from the standpoint that we're going through it and we're developing it and really building it as we go. And so what I've tried to do with this particular option and proposal was address the various needs and comments that I've seen and gleaned from folks. The bottom line, I think, on this particular piece that's up in front of you here is a proposal for how we could, and I used the term sprinkle before, sprinkle dollars into pavement rehabilitation across the region. I think it was Carmine that suggested that we include safety improvements, so we've done that. I know that Shane had suggested maybe more flexibility in expansion of roadways if needed. We're struggling with that one to address that. But that's where I really came in with the potential $5 million of regional money on an annual basis. So again, and Tim, to your point, the dollars are finite. What we're trying to do is identify the type of improvement, and then we can decide, if you will, how best to articulate that in terms of lane miles or centerline miles. And I don't disagree with you at all in terms of the difference between a 6-lane road and a 2-lane road. And we can get to that point. But really the concept of this effort and the inclusion of collector roads, because we've not really ever talked about collector roads. I am recommending that because I think it gives us more flexibility. It would be part of the functionally classified maps within the communities or the region. And so I think there is an opportunity there. So I guess I'm looking for feedback, and unless folks have a lot of concern, this is the process or the plan that I take to the board on Friday for consideration.
And I'll tell you, Mike, what I look at, and part of what I'm hearing with the group is that thinking back several years ago when we started, what I believe we have identified as a series of projects. I think we still have some difference of opinion on exactly when those projects may be slotted in time, but it appears that we are getting closer, if not there, on consensus of what are the projects, and then added those additional elements of arterial reconstruction, wildlife crossings, et cetera, that we now sort of have identified a universe of expenditures potentially. Again, with the hitch and the giddy up being when we do what and how they lay into what year. And so my struggle and what I keep wrestling with since our last meeting, so we have 4 things we have to figure out. How do we finish up RTA? How do we pay for it? How do we do RTA next? And how do we pay for that? And that those 4 elements combine in different ways as we look forward. What we have been some conversation about seems to have landed on, and part of this is because of the way the legislation is identified and the need to have 20-year plans or an extension that could be less. We are looking at, it feels like a 20-year plan with a 10-year funding mechanism. And I think in the final analysis, that one's going to be difficult to take to the public, I think, to explain why we have that apparent disconnect. And so how do we either do a 10-year plan with 10-year funding or figure out the whole kit and caboodle, from my perspective?
Thank you.
Tim?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mike,
I'm
and
sorry.
then
No, no, go ahead. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Tim, and then we'll go back to Mike.
I thought you were talking to me.
Thanks, yeah. I agree with what you just said. While I understand the thinking behind the 20-year plan with a 10-year funding source, and I understand, we've got the legal constraints that kind of both constrain the plan length, but also create the opportunity for a shorter funding cycle. I cannot see a path where the 10-year funding of a 20-year plan is something that I can support. I definitely see the merit in the 20-year plan with a 20-year funding source, pending also seeing the alternative or the option we've not yet seen. Because I could start commenting further about the risks of the only getting the 10 years of funding puts almost virtually all of the city projects are in the year periods 3 and 4. Therefore, what the city gets is completion of RTA 1 and the transit elements continuing and the RTA rehabilitation. Those things are all valuable, but all of the projects virtually are in the years periods 3 and 4, and that's not tenable to support going in for a 10-year tax when we know it's unbalanced. However, a 20-year plan with a 20-year funding is much more palatable from my perspective.
Mike?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I hear you, Tim. I'm not jumping up and down about the 10-year funding. I think I riled folks up pretty well. I can see some of the commentary out in the public. Keep in mind that that was really an opportunity to build consensus. And when I saw that there was not consensus in the current approach to the plan and the funding alongside that, and I hear comments like that, I threw out the other opportunity because from a legal perspective, we can do that. Is that ideal for all the reasons that you've either read about or Tim's outlined? Of course not. And so the plan that we just looked at has a 20-year horizon. An option is to go with a shorter time frame if the board chooses to, or if you choose to recommend that. But you can also go with 20 years. And I think to Tim's point, if you look at the entirety of the 20 years, it's more balanced that way. Because if you take a snapshot of just the first 10 years, it's a very heavy emphasis on completion of RTA 1, and there's not a lot of new projects, even if we allocate some of the dollars from the regional funding. So if you look at it for the entirety of the 20 years, then it becomes more balanced in terms of the investment across the region. Now, some of the decisions that need to be made or recommendations need to be made are, how do we incorporate the regional money? Well, or do we, right? Do we incorporate that as Rick's spreadsheet showed? We have a whole list of projects that could be funded up to $400 million in that first 10 years. Now, my gut would be that we should show some projects in that first 1 and 2 period, the first 10 years. But I don't know that I would recommend that we allocate all of the regional money for the entirety of 20 years, if in fact that's what we're considering. Maybe it's the first 10 years or the first 400 million that's allocated for some of those, we'll call them RTA next like projects. In essence, what that does is if you take the 2.6 or almost 2.7 billion, you add 400 million to it, you're just over 3 billion, okay? And if you look at it that way, we've in essence expanded the revenue for the 20-year plan to almost 3 billion. So again, I'm not arguing or disagreeing. I think that the points are well taken. Ultimately, keep in mind that, as I mentioned to you all before, my goal is to have a unanimous support for this, so that when it goes to the Board of Supervisors, there's unanimous support on the part of the board and this group, so that we can then go forth in a unified front as we go to the voter and ask for support. And that can take different forms, Madam Chair. Thank you.
I think, and I think important to remind ourselves that it's my understanding that our legal counsel has suggested that we don't have a choice, but to go back to the voters to get modifications to the plan. So we've got to go to the voters at least to make modifications to the first, to finish RTA, if you will. So now the conversation has been, how much do we expand or enhance that minimal need to go to the voters? So, okay. Are we ready to hear from General Maxwell, Mike?
The only thing I'd like to do before we turn it over to the general is there was and we can do this afterward, I'll leave it up to you all. There was a conversation, I believe it was requested by Terry, regarding the transit and the investment in transit on a rider per rider basis, something like that. We do have some information to share with you, Madam Chair. When you think it's appropriate, I'd like to ask the staff to do that, but we can certainly go to
Okay, why don't we continue going in, since we've been talking about the plan and all this, let's go ahead with Ted, and then we'll come back. Don't let us forget that before we end.
Thank
So,
you.
thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. And I really want to thank the TMC not only for your hard work, meeting 5 in 2.5 weeks, and we're probably not done yet. And the work of the staff and the work of the executive director has been remarkable in the last month. So we wouldn't be where we were. I want to also clarify one thing important about our option 2. Every time I would tell the executive director, and he's been working with me, and I've been getting feedback on this option 3 as well. Every time I'd say your plan, he says, it's not my plan. And so I want everybody to understand option 2 is option 2, option 3 is option 3. The two of us have been talking over both of these. And really what option 2, the goal of all of us is to get to a 9-0 vote from the board. That's the easiest way to go out and advocate with the citizens, is if we have a 9-0 vote. And I think the reason the board told him to focus on the 10-year plan is because the 20-year plan had been pretty flushed out. The 10-year plan had it. I don't think you guys have enough paper. So here comes more. Michael, you've got a copy of it. Tim, there's some small changes, so I'll try to speak to those directly from what you've seen. Full disclosure, I've been working with the executive director on this plan. I've also been talking with Tim Tamir and Terry Rosema to try to make sure I'm capturing their concerns. One thing I would like to point out, Madam Chair, is you have 4 questions now. RTA 1, how to fund it, RTA next, how to fund it. You also had one of when to go. I'm still very concerned if we consider going sometime outside of March. Based on the current numbers, the RTA TPT will bring in 71.2% of all the regional dollars to this region, other than RAC, when it's compared against the PAG funds. That's 2.5 times the money. So historically, even just in 2021 and when we showed the slide from RTA with the penny on it, it shows how much. It was about a 67%. It's becoming more and more a larger portion of our thing. So I'd like everybody to remember that. And Bill, did you get a copy of that sheet? I gave an extra one to Sam. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I interrupt you for 1 second.
Yes, ma'am.
Shane? Mr. Dilly, I saw your hand.
Yeah, thank you. Has this been sent out electronically already?
We're checking on that. Shane, just
I believe it has.
give us a second to, if
It-
not,
Yeah,
let's, because looking
I'm
at your
not
face,
seeing
you're
it,
not
so I
getting
thought
it. So that, yeah, give us a second. We can at least resend it just to make sure it's gone. Okay.
Yeah, you should have one. It should have been sent out with the one that's got all the projects and all the stuff listed.
It has not been sent, so give us just a second, because I think we're just going to pause for a second, because I don't think it makes much sense to start going through it until I know.
I'm always good with pauses.
I want to make sure everybody has a chance to have it in front of them. Thank you, Shane.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Yes,
Just a
sir.
thought for clarity. I think option 1 is the tweak plan. Option 2 is not the Ortega plan. Option 3 is the Maxwell plan. That's
Is the
my-
Maxwell plan. It's
Maxwell.
not,
Oh, it's more than it's more than just
not.
I appreciate all the help and the insight I've gotten on building this, and I think you're going to see it throw through something as we wait to get it out. The things I was looking at was RTA 1 had to be completed. We need an appropriate amount of funding to continue transit and expand its operations. And we needed adequate representation and share throughout this. And I think as we walk through this, you're going to see that it's done that. I want to give credit to both Jeremy and Anthony with the South Central District of ADOT. We sat down Monday and we talked, and what you're going to see in this is something this board just alluded to earlier, is consideration and how can we leverage the RAC funding that comes into the region. Now,
Yeah, what just got put up is not what we have in front of us. So
no, that's, I'm going to use, that's the jurisdictional share. That's what you got. What got put up is what was put out, and it is the plan.
Could you
Both.
post this out?
Both. And the reason I've got the jurisdictional share is because that third segment that was always coming up all the time was, okay, well, how's it being spread? How's this going? That will show how we've gotten to a thing that I believe all the municipalities hopefully will find acceptable. And there's some plans going forward. But this, when we get down to the, Shane, let me know when you've got that email with the draft 3 plan. And then I'll start talking through the specifics of this plan. And I'm going to highlight a little bit of what's the differences. Executive Director Ortega was absolutely correct that you could use that option 2 and just fund it with a 20-year tax. And I'll be real upfront. I'm a strong advocate for the 20-year tax. You don't go and sell on to investors, which our voters are investors in this. The idea that I've got this great system I'm going to build, it's going to take me 20 years, but I'm only going to ask you to invest 10 years worth of the money, because a system is a system. Everything interlocks, everything goes in. And there are some things that require explanation in option 3, but I think trying to convince the majority of the voters that you're going to only ask for 10 years for a 20-year plan, they're going to go, why? Especially when we've already said the money we've got in the first half, priority number 1 is finishing RTA 1 and building that, ensuring we let them know that. RTA 1 in this plan, the way it's funded, it's a little different from option 2 because it uses the RTA Next dollars predominantly for RTA. So what I would ask you to turn to, it's going to be on page 3. There is a new element added to complete RTA 1. So how does this guarantee we've got RTA 1 dollars there? In RTA, so line 47 on this one, it's the RTA 1 completion. I realize now I didn't change the 5. It should be a 6, and then debt servicing should be 7. But
second, Shane, your hands up. Were we able to get everything in?
My apologies, but I have not received that unless I've missed it somewhere. But
Okay.
since our meeting this morning, I have not received that yet.
Sorry, give us just a second. Thank you.
I think Dan's going to go do it. Shane, can you see the shared screen? Because this one's a fairly simple one because I'm just talking about the RTA 1 completion element.
Yeah, I don't mean to hold up the group. It is nice to have it in hand so I can.
Yep.
Okay, wait.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, would you like me to go? Okay. So the RTA 1 completion, this is going to be accomplished, the magic number being the $495 million that we need from the plan to complete RTA 1 projects with a high level of confidence. And that's both in option 2, it's in pretty much every option. This one actually allocates $500 million. But what it uses is it uses $262+ million from RTA 1, RTA Next dollars. So it's a combination RTA Next TPT. And when in that category under the non-RTA dollars, that's 5 years. 5 years of the PAG funds. And that's straight off the RTA extension slide that was provided by the executive director that shows basically the funding that we even received earlier that shows it. So the reason I think this is a good fix is as Mayor Winfield said, going back to the voter and say, we need to use some of our new tax. We were 300 million short, 800+ million short on cost to complete from the original forecast. They understand that. They understand that we had 2008. They understand you had you had COVID, and those were impactful. So that's why I think using a combination of those dollars. Now, the advantage that I like about the 5-year plan is after the 5-year plan, all that PAG regional funding money becomes available.
Question on that, Ted. So the line item says funding for completion of RTA one projects. Are you suggesting that we no longer are having 4 projects? It's
Correct.
just, this is a bulk of money for completion of the RTA plan, whatever mixture of projects.
The
it looks
art,
like.
early, before the executive director was tasked with coming up with a 10-year taxing option, the concept was treat RTA one projects as RTA one projects. So to Tim's point, they're all in the same bucket. Cost to complete needs another 495 million to get to it. So let's just list it right there. Now, the reason I like it being listed as such is that the public knows what it's being used for. We don't have to break out the projects. We don't know which ones will come first. You're ready to roll on grant 5 and 6. We need to still ask for the substantial change. It's going to be one of the questions that has to go to the voters. And once that's done, this explanation is very explainable to a voter.
Okay, and one follow-up question. Sure. For the committed non-RTA dollars, you'd said that is the region, that's regional
It's
dollars.
ag regional funds for 5 years, only 5 years. Remember, the first time option 2 was presented, it tied up the regional funds for 10.
Yep. I remember a previous spreadsheet, probably one of our first meetings, where there's a fund balance in the current RTA account.
Correct.
Of 139 million. I think it's projected to be 200 million after this year. Where does that come into play?
So I'd have to defer to the executive director on this one, because I believe his estimate of what the fund balance would be when we go to the voters without this money is more up in the 400 plus million. And then you add this to it, and that's what's used to get to the cost to complete for RTA one. And Mr. Ortega, you want to comment on that real quick here?
Madam Chair, Sam, if you remember the spreadsheet, I think that Rick had, that had all of the fund balance projects, if you will, funded out fund balance projects. Very simplistically, we're in need of about $1.1 billion total for completion of RTA 1. We have identified about 550 million, as I recall, 560 million of fund balance. And so that leaves about 400 million of unfunded RTA 1. What that does then, that breaks down at about 140 to come out of the first 5 years, as I understand it from Ted's proposal. 140 million would come out of the regional funding, leaving that 260 million thereabouts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
All right, Shane, any luck on that email?
Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Good, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Do you have time to print it out? We'll keep rolling.
You're good. Thank you.
So that's how I think you give confidence to the voter in this plan, and confidence to the board that the funding will be there for RTA 1. None of the RTA 1 element dollars goes into any of the total when we start talking about jurisdictional shares, because that was a promise we made in RTA 1. So when we start coming and dividing it, that should not be held against the city in any way, shape, or form, because we're just completing earlier promises. The option really does leverage a lot of the RAC. So you're going to see some, and it actually increases some projects in here. So if you're looking at the spreadsheet, and sorry, Shane, so I'll make sure I say these out loud because you don't have a copy of the spreadsheet, and this is why I gave it to you. It's simplicity for you to see what's changed really between the RTA, I won't call it even the RTA next tweaked, but the RTA plan before we started making all the tweaks. Anything in green is what's changed. So after sitting down with the ADOT team, we looked at leveraging the RAC dollars, and that's why you see a large increase in the non-RTA funding for things that are listed as ADOT/municipality project, because they are ADOT projects. They're going to be executed by ADOT. The IGAs will be with ADOT. ADOT and the team here is going to be seeing them get built. On that, we've added the Moore Road TI, which in conversations with Marana has become their #1 project. That's the one they want first out the chute. And that's 30 million of RTA next, leveraging 90 million of RAC funds. With that being the only project that's listed in the first period when you go to the plan, after sitting with ADOT, it still leaves them the dollars and the capability to do Albernon to Valencia. And correct me on this, Jeremy, if I say any of the wrong segments, but it allows them to do that in the first period and still having to build out on more starting later in that first period. This should allow those funds to be available.
Can I ask you to pause for one moment?
Absolutely. And
Thank you. Mr. Rosenberg. Terry, you got your
Yeah.
hand up? Thank you. Okay, great.
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you. Appreciate it. So I just want to clarify one point and it's more of a, I guess a clarification would be the best way to put it. So General Maxwell stated that Moore Road is Miranda's #1 project. And I think context is important here because I think he's absolutely right. It is our #1 project, but it's of regional significance because of Tangerine interchange and the ability to accomplish Tangerine interchange, to do a grade separated interchange there in RTA next can't be accomplished without Moore Road. So Moore Road has to come first because if it doesn't, we have no access across the freeway for people coming from the west side of the freeway, primarily Marana residents, Havre Valley people, or from the east side, county residents, Marana residents, Oro Valley residents, et cetera. So I just want to make sure that it's not like Marana is throwing Moore Road out there because there's somehow a significant benefit to the town of Marana solely, but because of the benefit regionally. Thank you.
And the timing of those projects. Got it. Thank you, Terry.
thank you, Terry, for that clarification too. And one thing I'm a believer in and would state to the board is all these projects that affect TIs have significant regionalism. So we put Moore Road on there as an addition. And the other new project that you'll see is the 4th line down under the ADOT projects, and that's the Rita Road TI in the city of Tucson. So by leveraging these RAC dollars, they're going to go to ADOT projects. They're going to be put to use how they are supposed to be put to use in the region. And it will be to cover the 4 TIs that exist in RTA next. So the changes, Cortero is moved to period 3, again, based on I'd say the priorities, and Terry, you can clarify again, but you get Moore Road done. Now you can go do Tangerine, and then you'll come down to Cortero, which has probably got some of the biggest challenges. And that is placed right now at the end of 3 and period 4. Probably it's later down, but down the series. So those were the big changes on the roadway elements. The other one is the Ina Road initial proposal from Marana, a lot more significant, had a lot more dollars in it. And the current 16 million, so that was a reduction that again allowed us to get more spread out in other areas of this plan. There are no changes. And one thing that this differs from option 2, just so you know, option 2 combines the safety dollars with the RTO rehabilitation. This goes back to what the original plan looked. Safety dollars are safety dollars, and there's no changes in the amounts or the designation of any of the municipalities or the distribution throughout the region. So no changes to that. And I know I'm jumping over the things. So the part for arterial rehabilitation. So the arterial rehabilitation dollars. Currently in this option, we have $236 million. We'll talk about how we're going to fund that, because if you jump to the bottom of the numbers, you're going to see that it's not at 2.67, it's at 2.77 billion over the 20 years. At a time it heard the executive director mentioned that he had 100,000 into arterial rehabilitation to kick it off. If that needs to be corrected to get down to the 2.67 by Friday for the board meeting, which I can see some advantages, that would probably be where we drop the 25 million that I put in for the county under arterial rehabilitation, and 75 would come out of the city's pot there, right, for arterial rehabilitation. But when we get down to what we're going to do with the money in excess, you'll see that's probably one of the big areas that's going to benefit when we have excess money collected above the pessimistic revenue forecast. It will change the percentages at the bottom, and I'll talk about that a little bit, but it will still keep the city of Tucson above 50%. I believe it's going to be above 51% when we get to the jurisdictional breakdowns. It will lower the counties a bit, but again, the counties numbers, when we get to the point, you're going to see that all the percentage breakdowns are more aligned with closer in vicinity of the populations of the different municipalities in the region and where the people live. The transit element, I included a new sub element. And this is one that's, I think, both important to the region and to the city of Tucson. And having talked with Mayor Valenzuela, I know she was interested in some money being put down there too. And that is the addition of a transit system safety line. Right now we've got forecast under option 2, 700 million for transit. Under this option, we've got about 726 million for transit. It's right at 26% of the overall funding. And in there right now, we have a line for 51 million. City of South Tucson moved some of their money out of their transit money up into that safety to get it to that amount. And any improvements on the security and the safety of the transit system inside the city of Tucson and South Tucson, where these dollars are allotted, is going to make it for a safer and more reliable system for everybody. So I do believe it has a strong regional pull and good use of taxpayer dollars, and one that honestly a lot of voters may like hearing. So that brings the revenues 2.77. If I make those adjustments on RTO rehabilitation down, it would take it down to 2.67. And the other thing that it's important to note is on the very bottom of the balanced RTA next plan is it talks about, and this is something that the board spent a lot of time talking about, is what happens if revenues come in above pessimistic. I personally think we should stick with the plan that PAG, the staff here laid out, where you adjusted the original George Hammond items for the current dollars, which means we only need 100. We're only expecting 120 million in the first year. If we just get what we're getting now, we're going to have 5 million of excess. So we believe, yes, it doesn't cross till year 13. It all ends at the same 2.67 billion though in 20, and it gives us an opportunity to not overestimate. More than likely enjoy 80% of the time, it's going to come in above the pessimistic view, some excess revenues. And it's important that we have some language, either in the truth and taxation and the code. I'm going to leave that up to the experts on the staff, how to put it. But if you go down to that very bottom, you can keep going. Not if we could come off this regional one back to the option 3 plan on the slide. And then if you go to the very bottom, it talks about the fact that there's 100 million right now included in RTO rehabilitation, which is above 2.67. If we keep that in there, we would use the first 100 million of excess revenues to pay that down. And if after the 5-year point, we still haven't paid it down, we'd use 7 million out of the PAG regional funds, still leaving the other 40 or 39 million to be used by the region. However, the more I'm talking through this, I'm probably going to take that 100 million out. So the percentages may come down a little bit, but I will make sure I reach out to those who are impacted by it, the county in the city of Tucson, to let them know how that changes some of the jurisdictional share money dollars. In which case, the way the option 3's impact on PAG regional funds would be dedication of the first 5 years to the completion of RTA 1. And after that, there would be no impact on it. However, what the board had previously approved and talked about was this percentage jurisdictional share gets the city of Tucson to about 51%. Talking with the city staff as well, and the previously approved was to take any excess dollars. And when I say, sorry, excess dollars is the bad word. What I've written down on here is actually much, much better. That's any further revenues in excess of the pessimistic revenue forecast. 75% would go to the city of Tucson. I think I've heard the city manager at the city of Tucson say you can plug as much of that money into RTO rehabilitation because we need it. And the other 25 million would be distributed to the rest of the county, or rest of them of the region. Once it hits 55% on the overall expenditures for the city of Tucson, at that point it goes to a 55-45 split for the remainder of the 20-year plan. I believe under the advice of the new council that we have, at some point, because we're only asking to spend 2.67, when we know we're going to bust over that, we're going to have to eventually go back to the voters and ask them if we could say, thank you. Can we spend the extra money you've given us? But we won't have to go back and ask for anything more on a sales tax, because that'd be a good problem, vice what we've had the last time. And that's the reason the board was so firm on staying on the pessimistic view. So that talks about what we do with the excess or the increased revenue from the above the pessimistic fund. If you could now go back to the jurisdictional share slide. So the one with the colors on it. And if you can go all the way to the bottom, what this does when the counties and the cities and the municipality, everybody looks at it with the extra portion in there right now, it takes the city of Tucson to 52.3%, takes the county to 27.3%, both increases from the last plans. And the biggest impact, to be blunt, is on Marana. It dropped from over 11% to 6.9%, but that's because we're using the RAC funds to really spend those on regional areas of interest, and there is some benefit to them to get more road, get Tangerine, and hopefully get Cretero. But I can't overemphasize, anything we do on I-10 is regional in nature. Unless, I understand there's some folks that may never get on I-10, but with a TI on the east side, the TIs on the north side, anybody that travels that road, those are going to be regional, provide regional advantages. The rest of the percentages really don't change from what we've seen before, but I wanted to make sure everybody understood that. And I'm wide open for questions, suggestions. At minimum from today, if the TMC is willing, I think the idea of letting the board know what you feel about a 10-year versus 20-year plan is critical. And obviously, I'd love for you all to get behind this option as well. But this option wouldn't exist if it wasn't for a lot of the hard work of the executive director, for the not executive director option 2, or the not Ortega option 2, or I'm going to call it the Marshall Ortega option 3, however you want to term it. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it, and wide open for questions.
And I've got Terry and then Mike. And Mike, when I was going to call on you in a moment anyway, but just I would like staff's response to this, and I know you've got some thoughts about it. Terry, and we'll go Terry, Mike, and Jeremy. Thank you.
Actually, Madam Chair, it may be more appropriate for staff and for Mike to make their comments, and I'll make mine afterward. Thank you.
Don't mind, we'll do that. Mike, let you go first, and then back to Terry and Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Appreciate that, Madam Chair. So a couple thoughts. The general did let me know he was working on this. I know he's been talking to some of the jurisdictional partners. And so I've not been involved in those. So I'll make an assumption that those conversations were fruitful, and that's why we have this plan in front of us. The piece that I think is a little concerning to me is where it says, right in the kind of the middle of the page, where it says RTA completion element. I'm a little nervous that we're asking for a pot of money to finish RTA 1 projects without specifying those. We know we've got to go to the voter for the rescoping and the substantial change. I'm just voicing that. I'm not jumping up and down about it, but I do think that from a specificity for the voter, we may want to put those dollars, those projects, and list them. At least those that we're changing. That's my gut on that. Unless, again, it's a policy decision, and if the board feels that they can sell, we'll call it a pot of money for that effort, I'm good with it. I'm just giving you my 2 cents on that. The other thing is I think the $100 million that's listed there. It goes back to what I had suggested at one point before, which is the allocation of $5 million a year. That's where the $100 million comes from for 20 years. The generals outlined a little different plan than what I had suggested, which is fine. I just wanted to remind you that what I had suggested was $5 million a year allocated out of the regional funding. That's compared. We compare the actual revenue to the projected revenue of the TPT. And if it comes in above 5 million, then there's no need for that year's allocation from the regional money. It stays in the regional allocation. If for whatever reason it's at or below, then that 5 million would come over into the RTA plan. So in essence, what we're doing is providing a safety net for that first 100 million above the pessimistic forecast or target, using the regional money as the first line of defense, if you will. So I just wanted to explain. I think we get to the same place as to how the general described that, but I wanted to make sure that there was clarity on that piece as well. The staff we received this yesterday. We've looked at it kind of general high level. It seems to match in terms of the balance. And what I plan to do is after this meeting, we will put a little cover note on it and send this as well as the other options to the rest of the board so that the board has all this information, hopefully today. So that gives them all day tomorrow and in preparation for the meeting on Friday. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Mike, appreciate that. I do think that there's some advantage to listing the RTA1 projects that are going to get completed, but at the same time, I also agree with City Manager Tamir that there's some danger. And I think with the money being there, at the last board meeting, Mayor Winfield says it's perfectly acceptable for us to look at the voter and go, our revenues were 300 million short in RTA1. We couldn't complete everything. We're asking you for 267 million more. So I think there's advantages showing it on there. I was more concerned when I'd be more concerned with the proposal to show the expenditure of the regional funds to accomplish those projects. The reason I believe option 3, and I like it, is we're showing all the projects with a 20-year funding plan that they can look at and say, oh, we need that, we need that, we need that. The RTA1 projects, they've already told us they need, and they told us they want. So I think we're better off not listing them, but I'm wide open and fully acceptable if the board or if the staff really wants to push hard on adding those. For the 100 million, I agree with you, Michael. That's why I'm good with taking away. If the TMC or the board or those who have that money want to see it stay on there. The alternative, how I would change it, instead of the 5 million a year, Michael, I would tag it the 7 years in year, or the 7 million a year, year 6 through year 20, because the first 5 are dedicated to RTA1 next, to be adjusted accordingly to any excess revenues we've got. So if we've got 60 million of excess revenues in the first 5 years, and that goes into the arterial rehabilitation, we reduce the amount that would come out of the regional funds by that amount. Same plan you had over the remainder 15 years. So that is absolutely something we can incorporate. And again, it would be, if we just hit the pessimistic views the first 5 years and didn't have any excess revenue, then it would be 7 million a year to make up for that 100 million if we chose to leave that in the plan. The other way is just say the first 100 million is going into arterial reconstruction, 75 for the city and 25 for the county, and we accomplish the same thing.
Quick, I've got Terry, then Jeremy, then Tim. Terry. What?
Just call me Terry. So I do appreciate the amount of effort and energy that's gone into both plans, quite frankly. And I think they both have their strengths and weaknesses. I do think and I did spend a significant amount of time talking with General Maxwell about the needs for the town, and with my mayor about the same. And I do think that option 3 here does accomplish just about everything that is on the wish list, hope list, desire list of all of the jurisdictions. From a percentage standpoint, you know, I know people get a little bit wrapped around the axles about that, myself and, you know, our council included. And I've gotten myself around to the point where I think that it's not about the percentage, it's about the projects. And as long as we can get the projects done that need to get done for the region, I think that I'm fine with that. And I believe that our council could get behind this option.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, General Maxwell. So I think one of the questions that we still have and that we think about is, you know, there's a lot of RAC funds that we're saying are going to go
Right.
in period 1, period 2, period 3 for those 3 projects. And I think we should just make sure we're all on the same page, you know, as TMC, as a region, before we elevate it up, because, you know, we still get questions on I-10 East. What's going to happen to Park? What's going to happen to 6th? What happens to I-19? How do we address that, right? Because once we obligate this and those RAC funds to those periods 1, 2, and 3, there's not going to be, it's going to take a big hit on I-10 going east, Park, 6th, and then I-19. I'm not quite sure how we address that. So it's just something that I think I want to put out there so that we can all talk about it and make sure we're on the same page.
Thank you. Okay.
And Jeremy, I'll agree with you. And yes, you're doing exactly what your job is. Your job is to protect that and think of the system at large. The projects, if you look at the current RAC fund and the 5-year and the RAC for those, because I didn't know what it was, Regional Allocation Advisory Committee funds. Those are the funds. It's a mixture of state, federal, and other dollars that come to the region. It's a 5-year constrained plan. And so there are a couple, and this is going to be my emphasis point, there are a couple programs. I mentioned Alvernon to Valencia, I-10. We believe that even if you take the 100, or that now down to 90 million allocated for more road interchange, that will still get done. What it's going to do is it's going to move a couple TIs to the right out later. My point on this one is these are the TIs that the regional council deemed as the most important. So those other TIs are important. The funding in the out years has not been programmed yet. We don't know exactly what our dollar is going to be. We say 150 million, but I'll tell you right now, in the next 5-year plan, every single year's forecast is above 150 million. It's anywhere from 160 to 180. And so there's additional funds there too. So I trust the staff at the South Central District that they're going to protect that money, and then they're going to use it for the best of their abilities. But when it comes to selecting the TIs, I do believe that's the responsibility of the board and therefore the voters.
Did the regional plan as approved have more in it?
But more is an addition.
It's an addition. Okay.
And Vita Road's an addition.
I think
Yeah.
the comment was that they're
Correct. Madam Chair, you're correct. More is an addition and Rita Road's an addition based on the idea of leveraging those RAC funds in a regional proposal.
that would be going to the regional council, but they have not approved.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, Tim, then back to Terry.
Thanks, Jan. Couple comments. One, I share Terry's comments about the amount of work that's gone in by everybody, including General Maxwell and our new executive director. And there's merits to both options 2 and 3. What I would say with regard to option 3, I do think it works. Not that option 2 doesn't. I just understand option 3 a little bit better and how it works. But I think both are better than where we were 3 months ago. So I think we're way ahead of where we were previously. With regard to listing of projects on the deferred projects, or however that terminology comes together, I'm kind of agnostic on that, but I definitely want to make sure we check all the boxes to make sure we cover scope changes. So just legal requirements themselves might lead us to saying certain things and listing enough projects to cover that volume of dollars. So I think we can solve that, and we just need to make sure we get one shot at this, do it right.
Right. I do think we need to list those.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Regarding the $100 million overage, I could go either way on. One way is pull back the 100 million from the categories as listed, I know that pushes the city's percentage down, and potentially the counties, which I can live with. I think we saw enough data that if we were to go in with a $2.7 million 20-year budget, I don't think that's too far from reality. I think that applies to both plans. So, because I like the way it lays out right now on option 3. So would I rather go in with 52 and shoot for the 2.76 million or 2.77 million? Almost would, but you know, now we're playing with monopoly money at this point. But then and my third comment is I appreciate the thoughtful way of looking at the RAC funds, is that, you know, additional bucket of money, which we all know and we all count on and we all appreciate. I know it commits those dollars in ways that they aren't currently committed, but I think in ways that, as we talked very early on in this meeting, if we look at the biggest pot of money and all of it together, I think we're landing in a pretty good spot there. And I like the regional dollars getting sort of freed up, as I understand it, after the first 5 years. So, is this better than the RTA plan of last fall? Yes. Or RTA next plan? Is it better than the RTA next tweaked plan, option 1? Yes. Options 2 and 3 are both viable in my book.
Thank you. Terry.
So I think really General Maxwell covered pretty well what I was going to say in response to Jeremy's comments, and I fully understand where he's coming from. I will just say that, you know, we had previously had roughly $1 billion of ADOT monies that were committed to a project that the region has decided is not as significant of priority as some of the other ones we have. So the way I was looking at it is we're taking that nearly $1 billion of funding and we're redistributing that. So I'm not sure if we already had that committed to aviation, to SR 210, and now we're just simply taking that and redistributing it to other ADOT type projects, interchanges. I don't know how that would negatively affect and impact future projects. So thank you.
Thank you. Anthony.
Can you guys hear me okay? I haven't spoken yet, so just checking.
Yes, we sure
Okay,
can. Thank
good.
you.
Just make sure. All right. Yeah, just to echo Jeremy's comments and to kind of respond to Terry too. I think it's probably more so about timing than anything. You know, looking at option 2, you see the other fund allocation for period. It says first through second period. So again, it's a lot about what the specific timing of that is, but it's $300 million in RAC funds towards Cortero. So if you're talking about $300 million in RAC funds towards Cortero in period 1, I mean, that's 2 years of RAC funds, right? That essentially are going to be specifically allocated to that TI. And I do think that is something that could specifically have impacts on other projects that have been, you know, are really also priorities for the region as well. So I think that's probably the other point I would make to that is it's not just about the funding, it's about the timing too of when these projects are going to go. Because as Jeremy alluded to, if we're putting $300 million in RAC funds on Cortero in period 1, it's going to have a pretty substantial impact to at least what we had an idea for what the blueprint would be moving forward with those RAC funds.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to your point, Anthony, under option 3, it's committing $90 million of RAC funds in period 1. So it recognized the fact that the South Central District had already allocated the RAC funds specifically for, in a large part, for that extension of I-10 from Alvernon to Valencia. So after that meeting, and obviously with Miranda's desire to get more road up there, number 1, that kind of solved what you just addressed we were going to have a problem with if this passed the voters anyway, particularly with the RAC funds, because reduce significantly the amount you're going to go. To Terry's comment, the $1 billion number was not ever really in the plan because that was something that the ADOT team had brought to us that, hey, the cost of 210 are you're going to need more, either more RAC funds or more funds, or you've got to give it. Remember, we cut it all the way back to giving 25 million for each leg of 210. Part of the reason we took it out. And the amount that's currently in option 3 is less than what was contributed to there. It wasn't the full $1 billion, but it's still a reduction in the cost. And more important to Anthony's comment, the timing fits better, I think, because we haven't built those next 2 periods of RAC funding yet. So it's something that the staff at ADOT will be able to incorporate into their planning and what they want to do going forward.
Sam, I'm just saying, but I just want to, we've tried to keep these at 2 hours. We have gone over. We still have one entire committee left to go. So would just starting to think about what's the pleasure of this group as we go forward in a moment. Sam.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I don't have any questions. I just wanted to say, and echo my city manager's comments. I like option 3. I think it gets everyone a lot of what they're looking for. And one thing that I want to point out is, at the very bottom of this option 3 spreadsheet, it says that it's almost $1 billion of non-RTA dollars committed. And I think what that tells the voters is that there's a lot of skin in the game in this plan. We're not just asking them to fund everything. There's skin in the game, and we're asking them to acknowledge that. And so I just wanted to point that out and put my support behind option 3.
And quick comment, one of the numbers that's not incorporated on the transit element, goes back to the skin in the game, is if RTA doesn't pass, it's not just the loss of the operational dollars for the transit element, but it's also loss of the continued expense, the management of the continued program that comes in from the county and from Moran and some of the other, and that's about another, I believe, 125 million. So you're talking about the RTA plan as it's written here is going to really bring almost 900 million in total investment in the transit system, not just what you see on this sheet. So
Thank you. And Mike, I know you got your hand up, but I'm also looking to you as our staff to help us understand what it is you would like to see us do to bring forward to the board this week.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that. And by the way, thanks to everybody, and thanks to you, General Maxwell, for the energy and effort you put forth on this. I think you can see it's well received by some of the partners that have voiced their thoughts on it. Madam Chair, here's what I would suggest. First and foremost, I would forego the transit conversation in terms of the cost per ridership. And what we'll do is we'll send out an off-agenda memo that just gives you that information, because it's really just information. I think that was requested by, I believe it was Terry. And then you all can react to that down the road. What I'm proposing to do is provide the board, as I mentioned earlier, with a memo that outlines the options. And in essence, I think the general mentioned 4 options. I'll tell you quickly, the 4th option is really a non-option. It's really what happens if we don't get if we just go to the voter for substantial change and the rescoping, which really isn't, in my opinion, an option. But I need to at least voice that to the board so that they know that is on the table if they decided not to talk about the funding. But in addition to that, I will give them probably the longest memo that I've ever given them that outlines each of the options and gives some thoughts, things to think about, things to consider as they go down this path. Your feedback today has been excellent, and we really appreciate that. I will incorporate that. If there is a will of the committee to provide a recommendation on one of the options or one of the plans, I'm happy to take that forward. I don't really have a recommendation right this second. I think what we're really trying to do is provide, as I mentioned earlier, as much information that the board can consider as they deliberate and ultimately make a decision. I'm hopeful that on Friday we will get better direction or more direction on this so that we can hone in on one of the options, which will ultimately lead to the plan, the funding of the plan, and the ballot language. So I've got to be ready with that. I have purposely not asked the attorney to look at ballot language because if we're looking at multiple plans, it seems like a waste of resource to identify ballot language for all of them. So if the committee would like to give us a recommendation that I could take to the board, great. If not, if there's still a lot of work to do or more work to do, happy to voice that. And Madam Chair, I do hope that you'll be at the meeting and you can articulate some of the thoughts that came directly from them.
Are you going to be at the meeting?
I will be in person, Madam Chair.
It's
In
that's
person.
what
I
my
will be there
snotty
in
mouth
person.
gets me, doesn't it? All right. Shane?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just can only echo the kudos going around on all the hard work. Thank you very much. Option 3, is there a way of, unless I'm missing this, is there a way of putting these into proposed periods, all these projects for option 3?
They are, Shane, so, but maybe
I'm
it's
sorry,
hard.
how am I not, okay, what am I missing?
So the portrait directed piece of paper that's RTA next fiscally balanced draft option 3, not the one with the colors, but the help, you can't, but that one shows the construction period in the right column.
The first email that was sent out.
We're going to put it up on the screen.
Oh, I got it. Okay, so
like
those
bunny.
two
Okay.
correlate. Those two correlate. The option 3.
Yes. And the other,
balance,
yes.
and then the one where, okay, got you.
Yes,
All right,
sir.
perfect. Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All righty, thank you. Jeremy.
Madam Chair.
Sorry, Shane, were you done? Was that the question? I just cut you off.
Yep. No, that's good.
Yes,
Thanks.
thank you.
Quick question on these committed non-RTA dollars. Those costs, are those 2026 dollars, or are those the year of expenditure dollars? Like if we're saying period 1, period 2, period 3, are those like what we're expected to spend in those period, or?
Everything's in current dollars.
What is the pleasure of the body? And I think part of what I'm looking, I'm trying to figure out a recommendation with a bit of an asterisk, because I think for many of us, we're just looking at this today, and I would like an opportunity to spend a little more time with our transportation director and deputy county administrator. Looking at this today, it looks like a fine plan to me and something I can support. But I know there's a lot of details involved. So Sam?
Yeah, Madam Chair, it just seems like there's a lot of support for option 3 versus option 1 because those are both RTA Next plans. Maybe it's a little bit easier on the executive director. Do we consider, I don't want to say eliminate, but do we consider maybe backburnering option 1? And this body feels that maybe option 2 and option 3 are the only 2 viable options that should go forward to the board. So that way it just provides a little more clarity. That
I would welcome that in the form of a motion, Sam.
I'll make that in the form of a motion that we move forward option 2 and 3 as the recommended options from the TMC.
Second.
Thank you. Yep, Bill? Oh, was that? That's the second. All right. Any discussion?
Madam
Yes,
Chair,
Carmen.
just for context, and I agree with your comments about needing more time to review option number 3. I think from my perspective, the discussion earlier about whether to name the projects for completing RTA 1, I think that's an important element to be able to display to the voters. And then secondarily, on the arterial rehabilitation, I would be supportive of retaining the 100 million and keeping the allocations for the county and the city of Tucson intact via whatever means is felt to be more appropriate, whether that's going with the 2.77 or dedicating upfront regional funds. And then if the revenue collection is greater, not using those, but using the TBT revenue or some other means. But those are the 2 comments that I have relative to option 3.
Good. Thank you. Yep. Mike.
Madam Chair, so to Sam, as opposed to Tam's point, to Sam's point, I think that could give us some good clarity that we pursue those 2, and then what we can do is really hone in on those. I would also suggest that if you're considering option 2, if you could weigh in on 10 years versus 20 years. I gave you the reason behind the 10 years. I'm not married to that. I think that's just an opportunity for the conversation. And we could also leave that just to the board, but I don't know if the committee would have a recommendation on the length of funding, either 10 or 20 years on option 2. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Maybe before we're done, we'll look at a friendly amendment perhaps, but Tim?
I have a friendly amendment to make it option 2 is only for the 20-year option.
Any objection to?
No objection.
The maker of the motion to the second?
Okay with me.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Sam knew better than to not accept my friendly amendment.
Any additional discussion? Okay. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Mike, did you have something to say before we voted?
No, I didn't. No, I
But
didn't.
okay.
Madam Chair. Thank you. I
Sorry.
just wanted to,
You just went
before
on.
you adjourn, I just wanted to take a quick second and let you know, I know we've been burning it at over 2 hours now. There is a policy objectives, procedures review conversation. I wanted to just take a second and let you know the idea and the intent there is for you as TMC members. You've already suggested that would happen, but you don't have to be there. That's actually a subcommittee of this group.
Right.
And you can designate folks from your organizations to sit around the table and go through that. It is not absolutely imperative that you all burn up more time going through that. The staff is ready to walk you through that. However, we'll give an update to the board just on the conversations we've had internally, as well as any feedback that we get from you. But I don't expect that to be, let's go through every plan or every procedure and every policy right after this. There will be a need for that, and I would even suggest that will be important before August 25th. It doesn't necessarily have to be solidified, but we do have to have at least a general understanding of some of the policy issues that were brought up by Shane in his letter a bit ago that we said, hey, we'll get to that when we get to the admin code.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And I think it is important. I'm not sure how much we're going to be able to accomplish on that, if anything, today, but to park it and bring a group back. I think I saw the agenda come out and open the attachment, and I believe it's 300 and some pages or something. So I was waiting for Sam to brief me on it, but that has not occurred yet today. But I have Tim and was it Shane? I'm sorry, I see just another hand is up. Tim, why don't you go first while I put my reading glasses on, then Shane.
Okay, thanks, Jan. And I will admit to not being fully up to speed on the policy proposals. And I'm just throwing one in there if it's not in there already, and it's not meant to be disruptive, it's meant to be thoughtful. When we talk about RTA next, traditionally, you know, we talk about there's mechanisms for the capital side of inflation and adjusted dollars and all that. But when we lock in on anything that's operational, it's kind of like it's flat. And so I don't know if there's a policy discussion that could be held about how to address it or not things that are more operational and how those, you know, should that adjust over time, gradually increase. Again, I'm thrilled with where we are now, even as written compared to where we were. But I do think, you know, over a 20-year period, operational things, if we're going to commit to doing a thing, it's not just that capital costs go up, operations do too. Just food for thought.
Done. Thank you. Shane.
I thank you. I was wondering if we could just make sure that in the motion from today's meeting that we recognize the importance of this policy discussion and that it's still ahead of us. So we recognize as a group that while on paper we've landed on these plans, option 2 and 3, as kind of, you know, focusing our upcoming conversations. The policies are something that we recognize also need to go part and parcel to that effort. And so if we could just make sure that's part of our action today, that would be great.
Good. Thank you, Shane. And I think, again, if we can't get to some of that today, that has been it's an important piece of this whole pie. And that if we can't, perhaps we have if there is a day where this group does not meet as TMC ever again, then perhaps we could just refocus the policy meeting on that day if we could. Mike?
Madam Chair. So there is an agenda item on Friday's meeting to give an update, Shane, and what I'll do is, although it wasn't included in the motion, and I'd be a little nervous about coming back after the fact, I can articulate exactly what you just said, which is the spirit and intent, and I'll address that with the board during that agenda item, so that way there's clarity on the fact that we are continuing to work on that, and that is an assumption that really is the foundation for the two options. And I think that addresses your concern, but also we can incorporate Tim's thoughts as well. Thank you.
And Mike, I think just so that we're absolutely clear, perhaps I would entertain a motion that we have a second item that we recognize that there is work to do on the policy portion of this, and that we will be coming back to the board to make sure that we're recognizing that, and that is, again, a critical element that we recognize we have not yet adopted, but we shall. But thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you. Sometimes we go back and think, was it a motion? Was it part of? And so I think it's best to just make sure we've got that on the record.
Thank you for the clarity, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And huge thanks to this group. General Maxwell, thank you. Always easier to edit than to write from whole cloth. So we've given us extraordinary document to work off of, and we appreciate it. Any other work for the good of this order? None. Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank